And we are live. So welcome everybody to Masters of Destiny 1, our special 2020 series, which will be updated, taking into account a lot of the events that are taking place at the moment. I'm just going to mute. Um, there we go. Yeah, there was a bit of an echo there. I will provide you along with the recording. So if anybody has still got their line open, sorry, Trisha, I've just muted you. I need to just keep that so that we don't have any echoes on the line. So I would advise you guys to have a notepad handy as I talk through the slides. So if there's any notes that you actually want to take, I will provide you with a PDF copy of the slides afterwards as well, so that you can also re-listen to the recording at any time and make additional notes in terms of what's going on. So welcome to this journey in this epic year of 2020, and so happy and delighted to be sharing it with you all. So the first thing that I'd actually just like to share with you before getting into the detail is that particularly this first session is actually content rich. It is a very dense information session because it incorporates and needs to sketch and lay out the foundation for the rest of the information to come. So some of the energy work and some of the additional processes that we're going to work with will become more relevant through subsequent sessions. But this one is actually quite rich because it's going to give you the overall perspective. So bear with me. I know that it can be sometimes a lot for the head to actually take in. If you're making notes, it actually helps with the integration. And just excuse me because I do use my hands when I talk. It's an innate characteristic. So if you see me waving my hands around the screen, if it gets a bit much, just let me know. I actually find that movement, the kinesiological effect of the movement, actually supports my ability to process and move information through as well. So it's quite fascinating doing that. It's always been a character trait of mine. So thanks for your patience and understanding with that. Okay, Masters of Destiny 2020. We're going to start off taking a look at the cosmic perspective of what this grand evolutionary journey actually represents for us and why it is so important. Those of you who tuned into the talk I actually gave on Lorraine Gailey's show a couple of days ago would have picked up from one or two of the slides that I presented some hints of what it is that we're dealing with and the quantum waves of evolution. So here we're really going to dive into it from a much deeper perspective and understand that what we are going through is an incredible living evolutionary process at this moment in time, and it cannot be stopped. There's no going back. The only way through this journey is forward. So the more that we are armed with from a perspective of understanding, from a perspective of knowledge, from a perspective of clearing out and the energy processes that we all go through, the better we're going to be able to navigate this process as individuals, and ultimately to benefit the collective and to benefit humanity, because all of humanity is ultimately being affected and adjusted, and it is impacting us at all levels of being. That's physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetically. The waves and what we are going through are really impacting us in very intense and deep ways at the moment. So worth bearing that in mind, because sometimes with the biological impact as well, it means that we can be experiencing extreme fatigue with the upgrades that we personally are going through. And I think so many of us have experienced that. Within the Golden Diamonds membership group, we do cover a lot of that on a week-to-week basis and provide a support network for individuals as well, and how each one of us is actually experiencing this grand moment or passage through time. So let's start with the cosmic perspective. This is a quote, and I've left this in. So to those of you, I just want to say this quickly, for those of you that attended it last year, because we have a number of people who are actually repeating it, there are just a few tweaks to the first slide, the first session, because the overall fundamental foundation for taking this journey forward remains pretty much intact and pretty much the same. But of course, each time we do it with a different group of people, there's a different dynamic, there are different questions, there's a different level or way of understanding. So you'll see a lot of the slides are actually repeated. There's been some tweaking. There are a few additions in respect of updated understanding. So I ask for you, for your patience in moving over what we have actually covered before, but we're moving over this ground and digging into it from a higher perspective this year than what we did when the program was first run. So thank you for that. So this quote I loved. It's from a documentary called The Four Horsemen. Some of you may or may not be familiar with it. It's well worth watching. It's a free documentary on YouTube. And it really is about the rise and fall of civilizations. So it gives you a lot of history as well as common threads that actually run through the building and the fall, the demise of all civilizations, and all of the markers that were present in the downfall of the Roman civilization, the Greek civilization, the Egyptian civilization, you name it. All of the various empires that have existed have a common thread and various indicators that are very clear markers of that civilization breaking down in order to make way for something new. And this for us is obviously, there've never been as many people alive on the planet going through this civilization change as we have at the moment. But this is a quote from their documentary, which really, really sort of touched a chord for me. And that is, to really understand something is to be liberated from it. Because when we understand something, it is easier for us to walk into it and be aware of what is happening in the terrain. So we can be aware of everything that is happening in the global arena at the moment when we understand it. That is one part of the story. It doesn't say that knowledge is the only thing, but knowledge is an aspect of what we need to be working with in terms of being able to navigate the shift that we're going through. So it's not just fluffy woo-woo stuff. It's actually very real. It is aspects that have actually been observed and monitored through previous civilizations. So the quote is really meaningful, and it points towards the understanding of what we are traversing in order to be able to assist us in our own liberation, because it means that we then have a higher perspective to be able to view it from, to bring about necessary changes. And this little quote, knowledge plus experience. So we have knowledge plus the emotionality, the experience, the energetic experience, the subtle energies, all of that that gets wrapped up in our physical and visceral experience of events together brings a deep understanding, which we may look at as a holistic intelligence. So what we're doing through this program is helping to build up a field of holistic intelligence that we can share with each other as well, that is a combination of both knowledge and experience. And that also, the two qualities balance the left and the right hemispheres of the brain. And that balance is actually vital for enabling us to get a measure of what we are dealing with, to come back to a place of neutrality and balance within ourselves. So vitally important that we have both aspects of the story. So as I said to you, please feel free to put any comments in the chat room as we go through. The recommended reading for this course, because a lot of the fundamental information is based on Carl-Johan Calleman's book, and this is highly recommended in terms of getting an insight into the understanding of these quantum waves of evolution, the 9 waves of creation. Really incredible work. And Carl-Johan Calleman is actually a biologist. And that is his background. So he looks at it from the perspective of how life and culture has actually evolved through these 9 waves. He became enamored with the Mayan civilization with information that he found out sort of 3-4 decades ago. And that is what his focus has been ever since. So there's some very valuable information in the book. What we do in the program is we take the core of what is presented and we build on it in terms of other well-known views and perspectives, as well as our own experience. So we're building up layers of knowledge and wisdom through the experience into a holistic intelligence that becomes meaningful for all of us. But the foundational aspect of the 9 quantum waves and the 9th wave that we're actually building up to comes from Carl's book. I don't get anything for promoting his book. It's really just to put it before you as something of great value that all of us who actually did this program also last year have found really significant and important on the journey to enable us to connect with these concepts in a much deeper way. So highly recommended reading that will assist you in putting this into perspective. So what we're going to cover in this session, just very briefly, top level, the cosmic tree, or the tree of destiny, as we might want to call it, how that fits in from a mythological perspective, together with the scientific understanding and insights, new insights in respect of the birthing of the universe, ancient cosmology blended with modern findings. Some very interesting stuff in respect of the cosmology that we perhaps have not been made aware of. 9, the sacred number, because what we're building up to is an understanding of the 9th wave, and why 9 waves of evolution. You find this, the number 9, that actually runs throughout mythology. Many of you will be familiar with it, so this actually summarizes a lot of that. The actual 9 waves of creation, the prophecies, and the 9th wave. Cosmic blueprints, your biology and your evolution, as related to the 9 waves, because there's some nice insight that's come through in the last couple of months. Accessing the spirals of time, we're going to do an energy process to support you with that, which is something you can work with for the next week. Creation versus being created, what the universe wants for you. And then Ascension Redefined. So that's just a top level summary of how we're going to approach this particular session. One of the questions that we raised in the first run through of the Masters of Destiny last year, it was this understanding of fate versus destiny, because many people equate the two terms and perhaps use them interchangeably, whereas there is a defined and absolute difference between the concept and the psychological approach to words such as fate versus how we approach and how we relate to the concept of destiny. So if we actually look at this, fate, at this, just this little summary, fate refers to predetermined course of events that is inevitable. Destiny refers to predetermined course of events that can be shaped by an individual. So it says that the influences, the content, the information, if we relate this to the waves, of evolution, the waves of evolution are downloads from universal mind that are actually predetermined. We could say that we are then swept along by fate in respect of the aspects of the waves. Instead, when we choose to look at them in a different way, we can actively use the knowledge that is present within those quantum waves to shape the way that we move forward. And I think many of you will actually get that. So that becomes a future that we participate in rather than something that happens to us. Fate is believed to be inevitable and cannot be changed. Destiny can be changed by an individual. Our destiny is not fixed. It is full of potential, and it is absolutely determined by how we actually resonate and what we resonate with within ourselves. Fate is often associated with negative connotations, and you'll find that in the languaging and the people that actually use this term, quite possibly very frequently. Negative connotations, and tends to give rise to pessimistic views. It's kind of like a what's the point? Well, it's just fate. You know, it's going to happen anyway. Whereas destiny, we look at And it's not associated negatively. Even using the word destiny implies an empowerment. It implies an action that comes from a place of power within. So it tends to give rise to more optimistic views and a more optimistic and positive energetic alignment. So that's what we're really looking at, and that's why we're talking about becoming masters of destiny. So we're talking about mastering the passage that we are moving through on the basis of the information that is available to us, utilizing all of the tools, subtle energy, physically and otherwise, that we have at our disposal. The destiny as I describe it, and this is also for a lot of you as well, I'm going to relate a lot of things in this course back to the diamond, and how the diamond consciousness is very active and very significant and very important in respect of the alignment with the ninth wave. Now, many who have been with the Diamond Light community for many years get that straight away, because I've covered in multiple courses, as well as in the monthly webcasts. For many of you who are not familiar with it, I'm just going to recommend here and now the program, the Diamond Template Activations and the Call to Presence program give you a very sound foundation in respect of the opening up to, and how the concept of the diamond, the sacred octahedron, as an energetic form and structure supports the alignment of your energy fields, the stabilization of your energy fields through this process, and gives you a huge amount of insight into the whys, whats, and wherefores. And you'll be able to see how it actually ties in with the new information in this program, and why I actually say it's aligned with the ninth wave. So I won't be going into a lot of that detail here. That detail is available in other courses, and they're actually on sale in the shop. I've got it at a very reduced price, so that anybody can really access it. So our destiny is linked with and is the clarification and the development of a state of consciousness that we may actually relate to and think of as diamond consciousness. It is absolute clarity, it is absolute purity, it is truth, it is transparency, and it is love. And that is the essence of our destiny, which we know, we sort of come through the new age schools of thought very often, and all of the talk about love. And this really helps us to understand and to connect with that essence through the diamond consciousness, and to understand it at another level. The diamond is love. The diamond facilitates the expansion of our heart area very physically, and for very valid reasons. It is truth, it is transparency, it's polishing all of those facets so that we can actually engage with life and fulfill our destiny personally and collectively. And our destiny is influenced by our inner resonance with the 9 waves. So which of the waves we actually have resonance with will have a determining factor in respect of how our destiny personally and otherwise is shaped. So I hope that makes sense for you. This, I thought, was particularly relevant and fascinating. And this was a quote from Nikola Tesla. And I loved it because it speaks into this concept of resonance that's just been mentioned. So this is one of the additional slides that I've put in, because there is another little insight from Nikola Tesla and how it aligns with all of this. The influences that shape our destiny, from the autobiography. He says, as I review the events of my past life, I realize how subtle are the influences that shape our destinies. And that's the essence of the 9 waves as well. They actually are extremely subtle. But our awareness of them and fine-tuning our awareness of them brings them into greater reality. So he says, an incident of my youth may serve to illustrate. One winter's day, I managed to climb a steep mountain in the company with other boys. The snow was quite deep, and a warm southerly wind made it just suitable for our purpose. We amused ourselves by throwing snowballs, which would roll down a certain distance, gathering more or less snow, and we tried to outdo one another in this sport. Suddenly, a ball was seen to go beyond the limit, swelling to enormous proportions until it became as big as a house and plunged thundering into the valley with a force that made the ground tremble. I looked on spellbound, incapable of understanding what had happened. For weeks afterwards, the picture of the avalanche was before my eyes, and I wondered how anything so small could grow to such an immense size. And that to me is a beautiful analogy of where we are at, and the importance and the value of our resonance with the ninth wave. Ever since that time, he says, the magnification of feeble actions has fascinated me. And when years later I took up the experimental study of mechanical and electrical resonance, I was keenly interested from the very start. So it's a concept, a simple observation of life around us, and I think the one thing that we can learn is to be acutely aware of of the way in which the natural world works, because that is what we are actually returning to, is a recreation of our world based on the principles of nature. That doesn't mean going and living in a hut in a forest, but it's based on the principles of nature, and this principle of resonance, of something small gathering momentum as it actually goes along, speaks into our understanding of the 100th monkey syndrome. It speaks to our understanding of the fact that one person standing up in their truth, in their power, makes a difference, because it initiates a snowball effect that builds to an avalanche. And this also speaks to the meaning of the vision that I was shown a couple of months ago, that those of you in the community are aware of, which is that this awakening process is building up to a tsunami. We've had a massive wave building up this year, and it is continuing to build, even though at times we look outside of ourselves and think nothing's happening, and look, they're really trying to impose this and that and the next thing. There is an incredible resonance that is actually building, and it is so important for us to be able to maintain the resonance with the appropriate mindsets, the appropriate clarity, the wisdom, the subtle energies of the ninth wave, because we are just those feeble small things that are building together one by one by one by one into an actual avalanche of awakening, which is just going to be beautiful to behold. So throughout the chaos. So I thought that was just a lovely insight to actually share with you and to hold in mind, because we need to remember that that is why we are actually doing this. So we have to now have a look at the cosmic vision. Now, this is something that's covered in Carl's book. Is he sketches out the introduction. There's a lot of science in it, so I've actually just taken the top line of it to give you guys some perspective. We've been taught through our traditional means of education that the universe was created through this thing called a Big Bang, the Big Bang theory, that there was a big explosion and that the universe came into being all at once and has really kind of been expanding ever since. And it's just all moving outwards. Well, the problem with that is that there are many effects that physicists and astronomers have actually been able to monitor within our universal area, things like redshift and heaven knows what. So I'm not going into that, but that they've been able to monitor behaviors in the universe that do not match the Big Bang explosion theory. And what Carl goes into detail in his book is this new theory of the birth of the universe, which was the emergence of a cosmic tree of life, that there was a cosmic tree, a cosmic axis that actually formed, that gives an inherent structure to the universe, which has actually been followed and is a pattern that has been followed ever since. So this particular tree, you can actually see in 3 dimensions. This is a 2-dimensional picture. You can virtually clearly see 2 dimensions, the axis of this central tree, which is the observation of the structure of the universe. And what we can't see on this image is the third vector, which is the front back vector in that tree, which gives us another set of coordinates. So if you have the up, down, and the side, side, which we can see in this image, and then we have the third vector, which goes front, back. As most of you who know me will know, we have the vector coordinates for the sacred octahedron. And that is something that has actually been proposed in terms of the universal structure in other sources. An author by the name of Douglas Vogt is actually one of them, where he talks about the multidimensional nature of reality. And he describes it as actually being the universe being created from a dihold, a model or a form, which is an octahedron. So he comes at it from a different perspective, from his scientific measurements and behaviors of atoms and all of that, that actually matches this theory of the birth of the universe, which is the emergence of the cosmic tree and observation of the structures and movement and behaviors within our universal environment. So I'm going to leave that with you. Does anybody have any questions on that? It really is just a top level understanding, because it keeps the diamond focus in perspective for us. No. Sorry, there's so much talking that I actually do need to have a bit of a drink from time to time. So I've got my tea handy. Okay, so let's just have a look at some of the observations which further confirm the cosmic axis that is depicted in the previous image. What has actually been noted, and these particular images are referred to, I think, in Carl's book. The source of the images actually comes from a BBC News article, which describes an inherent polarity which is built into the very universe itself. So we talk about the work that we are doing as well as transcending polarities and duality. We live within that polarity. Our job is to be able to balance all of those. But this becomes really interesting, because what has been discovered is that there is a cosmic or universal axis, which you can see here, that defines, if you like, the different coordinates of our cosmic space, and that there are different temperatures observed in different areas around that particular cosmic axis. Which just didn't make any sense to astronomers when they discovered it. And this particular image here on the right-hand side shows that very clearly, that all of the heat in terms of the creation, the alchemy, because alchemy requires heat. So you've got, obviously, red represents heat, the blue represents cold. All of the heat that represents the alchemical birthing of new events within our cosmic environment are all spread along the axis of the cosmos. And this is an actual imaging, temperature image that was actually taken by astronomers, or was calculated by astronomers based on measurements that they had taken. So the tree of life itself is not merely an axis, but it's the source of space in all three dimensions. In other words, it is a perfect geometry. And Carl does kind of talk about geometry in his book in respect of the structure of the universe, but doesn't take that through to the sacred diamond or the understanding of the octahedron, which is where we come from. Does that make sense, guys? So I just want you to understand as well, one of the things that's also been observed, which is rather fascinating, is that there are, on different sides of the one cosmic axis, of the vertical axis, are galaxies with opposing spins. So this is one of the observations that they made, which determined the opposing polarities showed them that there are opposing polarities inherently built into our universal structure. So it's part of the blueprint upon which we are also born, the same blueprint upon which we are born. So that cascades through. So life itself emanates from the alchemical crucible, which is the tree or the octahedron at the very center of the universe, the cosmic axis, as it might be called. So here's another image of the cosmic tree used with permission. This also comes from a cosmological simulation. So it's based on mathematical formulations put into a computer model based on observations and findings back to the birth of the universe and the image of the cosmic tree that was actually generated. And Carl actually prints it and talks about it in his book. So here you can perhaps see more clearly the two-dimensional form. Interestingly, it also looks a bit like a human form with the head, the heart, the body, the arms outstretched. So it just is interesting how that simulation actually presented itself and respective representing the cosmic tree. What is also interesting is that Earth, which is being deemed through many, and I put it in inverted commas, New Age information sources, has been deemed to be a special planet within the universe. Well, what has been found is that it actually does have a special position in the universe because it's aligned with the cosmic axis in such a way. This is what they found, that it is conducive to the emergence of life in this part of the galaxy, on this particular planet, within this sector of the universe. And that is the estimation of cosmologists. So that's really fascinating to sort of also put into perspective that Earth itself, from a cosmological perspective, we know we're not the only planet with life, of course we're not, but it actually does have a special role to play. So the evolutionary process that we're going through at the moment is highly significant from multiple perspectives. Okay, so when we now go and have a look at the mythology that lies behind the concept of a tree at the center of the universe, the cosmic tree, we actually find that there are many mythologies that actually speak about cosmic trees and the concept of the number of 9. One of the most significant and enduring ancient mythologies is that of the Nordic tradition, where they talk about very distinctly the world tree. So this is a pictorial description of the world tree, and you can see that its roots are actually, or its trunk, sorry, and its roots are surrounded by spirals. Here it's actually presented as a serpent. The serpent itself actually represents the spiraling waves of evolution around the trunk of the tree. So this is really fascinating because the whole concept of the Maya is that the 9 waves of evolution emanate from the central cosmic tree and emanate outwards in waves and spiraling configurations. So the whole concept of serpents and their attribution and association with life arising runs through multiple mythologies and is depicted in multiple different ways, but comes back to the same meaning. So we see the serpent tied around the trunk of the tree. We see a dragon here sort of curling around from the top to the lower parts of the tree. We actually see fire and water, the alchemical components, which represent the alchemy for life on both sides of the globe, the cosmic egg as it's actually being represented. So the associations with this tree of life, and then in the branches up here, in the visible world, in the branches of the tree, we have all forms of life actually emerging. So that really is just a mythological representation of the very fact that the tree itself aligns with the production of life. You know, and if we relate this concept of trees to the presence of life on Earth, we know that without trees, and their capacity to produce the nutrients and the oxygen and the environment that we need to live, we would not have life on Earth in any meaningful way. We would not have the capacity to create the forms that we have. So it is, and also the trees, the physical trees on the planet are interconnected through their roots all around the planet by a fungal web. The trees represent our organic internet, a very, very significant aspect of our organic internet. And there's a whole lot more on trees that we can kind of work through in subsequent sessions, but it really just brings that analogy to life. And one of the reasons why the tree is actually used as a symbolic connection to this cosmic tree. So we have the Nordic world tree, which is depicted here with the 9. Here it's presented as the 9 worlds of the Nordic world tree. The 9 worlds associated now with the 9 waves of creation. So we have the same mythology carrying through different cultures. And what is significant here is some may recognize this central form as Metatron's cube. It is also the hexagonal form in 2 dimensions that represents the octahedron at the center. So the source of life actually emanates out in all directions from this octahedral core, the sacred diamond, if you like, at the core. This is just another way of depicting it, and there you can actually see it as well. So you can also see how this relates to perhaps this image with your your positive, negative poles, your masculine, feminine poles, the fire and water, the 2 opposing elements and the inherent polarities that actually hold all of life in place. So nobody got any questions so far? You guys are okay? So we come now to the sacred number 9. And this we covered in a number of different ways, but again, we're looking at the 9 waves of creation, which we're going to go into in detail. The number 9 is another one of those numbers that actually runs through just about all of the cultures on the planet. They all recognize some sacred significance in respect of the numerology and in respect of this number. And that you can dive into as another complete subject on its own. So this is, again, just a top level look at the sacred number 9. It's encoded in virtually all mythologies and cultures. It is a number that's associated with completion. It is a perfected divine number. It is the completion of a path or a journey. Once you get to 9, you actually start again, because 10 is 1. It brings us back to the beginning and another journey. It is one who accomplishes divine will, for want of a better description. The Freemasons actually refer to 9 as the eternal number of human immortality. So that brings us back to the understanding that our immortal nature, our true self, is actually eternal and is achieved through the recognition and embodiment of that perfect divine love, the perfection of love at our core. In a biblical sense, there is talk of the 9 choruses of angels actually providing a complete symphony. Taoists refer to the 9 nodes of the bamboo, which is used as a developmental analogy in the Taoist religion. So you work through the 9 nodes. It's part of the growth and evolution of the human being. In Islam, it's referred to as the 9 openings of the man. Siberian tribes refer to 9 notches of the birch axis of the world. And here we get another allusion to the tree. China, it's linked to the dragon or the serpent, so the spiraling waves. It's the 9. There are 9 attributes to the dragon. There are 9 forms of dragon. 9 is the number of the emperor, who is perceived as actually being the highest form in physical form of human expression, closest to God or the divine. The 9th dragon is actually linked to heaven, and in the philosophies and religious creeds, there are 9 gods. In the Egyptian Ennead, there are 9 gods as part of the Ennead. So it's this number 9 is just really, really significant throughout history. It's been something that has been inherently known in the hearts and minds and the entire being of man. In Greece, there are the 9 muses. The inspiration in Brahmanism, we actually have Vishnu incarnating in 9 avatars in order to sacrifice himself for man. That's the allusion to the elevation of man to God status. So Vishnu sacrifices himself in order for man to be able to grow through. The presentation of those 9 avatars, the energies that they represent. Scandinavia, Yggdrasil has just mentioned, the world tree has 9 worlds. The general theme of 9 worlds and 9 waves of creation originating from the prime source, the prime creator, the original tree of life, which we now can see is a structure that exists at the center of the universe. So it's almost like taking all of those mythologies and what we thought were just stories is actually wisdom that has been encoded into the human form and the human being from the very creation, beginning of creation itself, from the beginning of the manifestation of human form. This understanding of the 9 has actually been observed, and it's been carried on through multiple generations. So the concept of 9 waves of evolution is not new. It is just presented in a very meaningful way, along with a calendrical system, which highlights this particular period in time. And that's what makes the Mayan presentation through the 9 waves so significant. So I hope that makes sense for you. The sacred number 9 as well, I just wanted to link this back to the octahedron or the diamond. The sacred octahedron has 8 facets, fused and balanced around a central point, your central point that holds everything in place. 8 plus 1 equals 9. So you've got the 8 plus 1 in the center is actually the 9th holding everything together. So here you get the analogy again. It's one of the few sacred geometric forms that is equal in all directions, with all facets. It has equal balance, equal pressure, equal absolutely everything. And also there are numbers associated with the sacred octahedron, one of which is 144, which adds up to 9, and 108, which adds up to 9. So some very significant numerology associated with it. So I always say, even though the diamond, we're tempted to think of it because it only has 8 facets or 8 faces, as relating distinctly to the number 8, it actually inherently ties into the number 9 through its structure and form and mathematics, associated mathematics. And I've always said this particular picture here is one of my favorites. It's 8 individuals joining together in order to birth that particular form, the creation of that form in the sacred octahedron. And I'm sure that energy work that is actually done with 8 individuals brought together to create this would be absolutely phenomenal. I'm sure the subtle energies that would flow through that would be quite incredible. So I'd love to, one of these days when we have an in-person group, be able to create that in person. If any of you have the opportunity to do that yourselves, it would be a wonderful thing to try and to experience. So coming back to Nikola Tesla, and again, I just want to, because this links us back to the magic of the number 9, and it also links us into the number 8 again. So it's the diamond, the 8 and the 9. And I hope this is making sense for you guys. As I said, this is actually really rich in terms of its initial content, because it just pulls together strands in order to give us an overall vision to carry forward. So Nikola Tesla says, if you only knew the magnificence of the 3, 6, and 9, then you would have a key to the universe. So in order to understand the universe, it's important to understand the 3, 6, and 9. We know that the Solfeggio musical frequencies that are becoming very popular represent a pure tone that actually aligns with universal harmonics, which is really very important. and that they help us to connect more deeply with the source and with the divine that is within us, instead of the distorted scales and attributes of modern music, which serves to distort. So 369, it's also in mathematical terms, Tesla explores this from many, many different angles. It's not just solfeggio frequencies, but it is one of the aspects of manifestation. So I've got here number 8 equals 3, 6, and 9. And in case that seems a little bit cryptic, let me actually just show you here. So if you look at the 8, which is an infinity symbol, you can look here and you've actually got, numerologically, you've got the number 3 within this form. So you have the number 3. You also have the number 6. Okay, so you take this curve and you curl it around your bottom loop, you've got number 6. If you take the top curve and actually spiral it down, you've actually got the number 9. So even just in the form of the number 8 in this representation, you actually have 3, 6, and 9 encoded within it. So the 8 of infinity that is used to represent infinity is encoded with the numbers that are significant in respect of the universe. Now, number 3 is really important, and I want to relate this to the waves. So this is something, the waves, quantum waves of evolution, that I just want to tie into a different aspect for you as well. So number 3 actually represents the divine blueprint creation in this form. So it's the birthing of the original blueprints, the making available of those blueprints. 6 in numerology represents embodiments in form. So this is the journey from creation and blueprint into form and embodiment. And 9 represents the return to source. Okay, so 6 is the embodiment and all of the experiences that go along with embodiment and all of the learning. 9 actually represents the journey back to source. So you have this beautiful wave. And I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if you actually fold over the yin yang symbol, you actually get the infinity code or the infinity symbol of 8. And this is an indication of how the 3, 6, and 9 mathematically fit into the infinity code. There's a whole other study of that. I'm just putting it here. So if any of you want to explore that further, you can. But these links are just everywhere, which is just really beautiful. So 369 is encoded into the solfeggio sound frequency scale as well. And this was fascinating for me. The intervals between the hertz levels of all of the solfeggios on the scale is exactly 111 hertz. Each one of those intervals is 111 hertz. So it's like the gaps between those solfeggio frequencies are the pause or the gap, which represents, it's almost like the in-breath and out-breath of the divine, because 111 is the vector number of the diamond. 111 is a diamond number. It represents the physical form and structure of the diamond. So again, through a different way, we actually have numbers and frequencies actually guiding us back to the source of life, represented through the sacred octahedron. And this is just one other manifestation, and we'll explore the Hertzian music and that a little bit further in future sessions. But this was particularly I found it very exciting. So I hope you guys actually enjoy that. So some of the links that are actually being made. So it was just fascinating that based on the 369, every gap, every step up from one solfeggio frequency to the next is a gap of 111 hertz, all the way up the solfeggio scale. So it's intricately tied in with the understanding of the 369. So the 9 waves of creation. And this is actually taken from, the understanding is taken from Carl's book. And it is the principle. Hi, Laurie, good that you could join us. So, so it's taken from Carl's book, and that is the entire principle is that all of life is created through waves or spirals of energy, and that these waves are pulses of energy which emanate from the cosmic axis. So they emanate from the world tree, as we saw in the earlier slides, from that central universal axis. Each wave carries specific holograms of information dependent upon its frequency. So the entirety of the wave is that it carries the same information all the way through the wave. Each wave carries a different hologram, if you like, of the entire universal mind, but the whole wave actually has all of the same information. And it goes back to fundamental understanding that all energy is information. Okay, all energy is information. So each of these waves that has a specific frequency is energy, therefore it brings with it information. That wave interference, which we know causes turbulence in the transition zone. So when you have more than one wave active at the same time, and you can see it in ripples on a pond, you chuck two stones into a pond, you get interference patterns with the two lots of ripples that are created. So if you've got two waves that are actually impacting at the same time, you're going to get turbulence or chaos at the nodes where these waves overlap. Okay, so we're actually in one of those really turbulent times at the moment where we've got an overlap of various waves impacting on the psyche and the biology of humanity at this moment in time. Okay, so it helps to understand the turbulence and the chaos that we're actually seeing in the outside world. It wasn't quite as evident as what it's actually been this year, but it'll make sense once we start getting into the waves. The cosmology of the 9 waves is based on ancient Mayan cycles of time, which have been shown to correlate with physical events that have taken place upon the earth. So there's almost been a validation of that ancient knowledge and knowingness of those cycles. And it is the understanding of those cycles which becomes relevant at the moment, as I actually said earlier. All 9 waves have now been operational since 2011. So there's been a progression or a sequence of waves. Since 2011, all 9 are operating and fully operational. And we are experiencing all 9 of them playing out at the moment. Each wave has 20 times the frequency of the previous wave, which means the level and the type of information that it carries, if you think of one wave, which is really slow to move, it doesn't actually have as much information as something that is coming at you more frequently, because you've got more kinks and curves in the wave. So it's actually holding a lot more information per unit of space and time than what a longer wavelength does. So we've had this stepping up in terms of the type of information that's available. The current time of fulfillment of human destiny, in other words, the 9th wave, is prophesied by all ancient cultures. And that in and of itself is fascinating. So it's kind of like this awareness has been there through those ancient cultures, along with the awareness, the awakening, and the challenges that it brings along with it. So the fact that we are being challenged in many different areas to really step up into our destiny, that's part of the process. Because without the discomfort, we would not be forced out of our comfort zone and forced to actually find out exactly what we're made of. And this is it. This is it. We're finding out what we're made of on this journey at the moment. The more we connect with and embed the holograms of the 9th wave, the stronger the signal becomes in the field for access by the collective. So going back to the previous slide where we were talking about the resonance and the snowball effect and that tsunami, the wave of awakening that's actually coming, that is directly related to our capacity to embody and embed and align with the holograms from universal source of the ninth wave that we've been gifted with. We are gifted with. So it's understanding what the content is of the previous waves that we're busy shedding and letting go of, because we're all letting go of patterns in the earlier waves so that we can maintain structure through them all, and then maintain a stronger alignment with the ninth wave so that we build a resonance that actually infiltrates the collective field. Outcomes are dependent upon our alignment with cosmic law and natural law, because what the ninth wave does is it restores our capacity to operate within the framework of natural law. So it's going to be a case of finding new solutions, utilizing the technological development that has actually been done, and the pathways and strides that have been made up to this point in time, utilizing all of that incredible knowledge and wisdom in such a way that it enables us to create societies, to create relationships that operate in harmony with natural law. So as I said before, it's not about going and living in a cabin in the woods, although sometimes I think some of us would want to do that. But it is about understanding the flow and the sine wave of natural law. And there was something really beautiful that I saw from Zach Bush this week. Many of you may know him. He's a wonderful holistic doctor who's actually come to more public awareness and prominence this year because of his outspoken views on concepts of viruses and what is actually happening at the moment. But he was actually saying nothing in nature operates on the basis of a straight line. It is all curves. Even the flow of water is curves. And that is part and parcel of it. It is the flexibility. It is the movement. It takes us out of the rigidity. Now, a lot of people might look then at the octahedron and go, but that is a rigid structure with straight sides. And yes, it is. However, the properties and qualities of the sacred octahedron are such that the alignment to that shape and form instructs energy to flow in such a way that it flows in toroidal fields, which are curved. So you get this beautiful balance of a structure that actually facilitates an energy flow, which is in accordance with natural laws. Does that make sense? Yeah. So you get this balance of form and flow. And that's really part and parcel of the natural law. So the structures that we actually create, we want to enable and facilitate a natural flow of subtle and physical energies through them. Okay, you guys still all right with all of that? I told you this was very dense and heavy for the first session. So yeah, I don't see, and unless I'm missing it, have there been any, oh, there we go. I've got the chat room up. Oh, so right. So thank you for that. I finally managed to bring it up. I just want to have a look at some of the questions and take a little bit of a break from the information. So Rachel says, with Carl's book, the first chapter can be difficult to grasp. Yeah, that's where Carl talks about the cosmic tree. But persevere as it's an incredible read. I read the first chapter again after I finished, and I was then able to understand. Fantastic. Beautiful. Ika says, I am an anthropologist, culture, senses, mystical experiences, etc. But I'm here because of most of what you talked about. I got in direct downloads since 2015. That's just fantastic. Ika, thank you for sharing that. That's wonderful. And I hope this will also make a lot more, and perhaps there's something of value that you can actually bring to this as an anthropologist as we go through the material. Because what I love to do is to open up and declare the space as a collective wisdom space. So whatever wisdom you guys have to bring to this space enriches us all. And in that case, we are actually resonating and we are magnifying and amplifying the effect of that knowledge when we are able to share in it. So I do invite all of you, if you have anything to share, to offer through the journey, please do, because that's how we magnify what is input into the field and the wisdom that's accessible. Thank you for that. Ika says harmonic resonances were the guiding keywords I followed on my journey that led here. I'm Electric Universe fan, Tree of Life and Taurus. Love it. Thank you. That just sort of validates what we've been going through. Manon says fascinating. Vishnu, yes, all makes sense so far. Thank you. That's the job I was told, to make it available to the collective. I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, Rachel, thank you for that reminder. That's very interesting. Today is the 18th day of the 99th day of the 9th wave. How amazing is that? We've got 999 or 9999. So it's a beautiful confirmation and validation at the start date today. And it's a 3. We got 21. It's the 21st of November. So we've actually got a 3. In that number too. Thank you for those comments, everybody, so far. As long as you're happy with that, we will continue. So excuse me, I need to have another drink. Okie doke. So this is just another little bit of insight from Carl's book, just a few top level lines. 9 creational waves emanating from universal source and the cosmic tree. They are known as serpents or dragons. So this leads us into some of the cultural mythologies around dragons and indeed serpents, and dragons as associated with the birthing of creation, the dragon's egg, etc. So there's quite a bit there. Each subsequent wave comes in at a frequency, sorry, that's a typo, it's not 20%, it's 20 times higher than the previous wave. Each wave carries information in holograms in support of the evolution, overlaps and transition periods between waves, which I've mentioned, supported by indigenous creation stories and prophecies. So the concept of this is not new, it is supported through all cultures. Each wave has a day, which is its upward movement in the cycle, which is outward, creational, and evolving, and a night, which is internal, reflective, and destructive, which is the breaking down of what is no longer needed in order to reemerge into a new day. So it's the breaking down and the emanation, the breaking down and the growth. Break down what we no longer need so that we can rebirth the new. The wave we are most in resonance with impacts the reality that has actually been created. So what you'll be able to do also, by the time that we've been through all of these, this program with all of the waves, you'll be able to see which wave is operational out there in the external world and what it is that people are resonating with. Because once we have that understanding, it also enables us to look within ourselves for where those patterns need to still be broken down further. Because as we break them down, don't forget, that also creates, and we heal them and alchemize them, any description you want to use, we also feed that information into the collective. So what we do is actually really critical at this moment in time, in support of the collective. And you guys all get, I think, the principle of resonance. If I can just relay a little story, some of you I know have heard it before, along those lines, is the understanding from Rupert Sheldrake on the concept of morphogenic fields that are related to specific species. If you guys actually heard me sharing the story of the rats and the maze and the learning, which is an indication that something takes place in the field which is able to shift the responses of humanity. And I just love it. I use the story all the time. But he tells the story of rats in a laboratory in Australia that were presented with a new maze to run. And the rats in that laboratory were timed in respect of how long it took them to learn to navigate the maze that they were presented with. So that was measured time-wise. What they then did was they took that same maze and they took it into Europe, and in a number of different places in Europe, but it was sequential. So they actually put the rats into a laboratory in Europe, and they monitored now how long it took the rats to learn that particular maze. And lo and behold, no rats in Europe had seen what the rats in Australia had been subjected to or how they'd learned it. But the rats in Europe learned to navigate that maze more quickly. So all of the timestamps in that experiment were quicker than what they had been originally. They then took the rat maze to America, and they did the same thing. And by the time they got it into the laboratories in America and then timed how the rats actually learned, it was quicker again. So each time that was introduced to a new population that had not seen it before, the speed with which the learning and adjustment took place was much, much quicker. And that lends itself to the understanding that we are embedded within a field, and the understanding that we can, when we learn something new, we embed that within the field. We therefore make it easier for those who have not yet been exposed to it to learn more quickly. And as a beautiful example, in 2020, with the awakening that we've seen, we've actually seen that in action. Because from March this year, with the events that took place, I don't know about you guys, but I've seen people almost like popping and learning what it took me like a few years to learn, learning it in the space of 2 months. And I'm going, wow, it like took me years to actually get to grips with that. But all of a sudden, because of the circumstances that they've been presented with, they're actually learning much, much more quickly. And that's the beauty of it. So that we're actually seeing it in action. So it's a case of not being in despair or getting too caught up with the narrative that's going on out there, to reinforce our alignment and understanding of what it is that we're doing, and why it is actually so significant, even when we don't see the results immediately, to know that it is happening. So I hope you actually enjoyed that. I love that story about the rats. It just is so meaningful. Sorry, I've skipped a page. So many of you have actually seen this before. Sorry, I'm just looking here because no, it's not. I've lost the chat room again. so just excuse me. I don't know what happened. It actually closed down. Hopefully I'll be able to get it up again just now. The 9 waves of the Mayan calendar system and what they represent. This is a framework that we're going to be building on in subsequent sessions. So this is fundamental to everything else that we're going to cover. The birth of the universe and the first wave that emanated from that cosmic tree is estimated to be, the wave itself, according to the Maya, was activated 16.4 billion years ago, which correlates more or less with what the estimated birthing of the universe is or has been. So the first wave has an incredibly long wavelength. It's very, very slow. 1.26 billion years. So we can only expect to see, any kind of like major changes, if you like, sort of devolution, evolution in a cycle of 1.26 billion years as it sort of goes into decline and comes up again. So we would only have been through 16, more or less, 15 and a half such cycles since the birth of the universe. So the fundamentals of matter have not changed incredibly since the birth of the universe. And that is actually the stability, because the information contained in the first wave is on the formation of matter. So you've got this coming together, the creation of elements, the solidifying of all of those elements into rocks and planets and moons, and sort of the evolution from stars. So we're really talking at a grand scale in respect of this first wave. So it is about transferring energy into material form at its fundamental level. So it's all of your atoms and your molecules and all of the rest. So that's the information in the first wave. The second wave was initiated. See the activation of the wave here in the end column. That was initiated 820 million years ago. It has a cycle of 63 million years. And that to me was fascinating because based on the archaeological records, we see and archaeologists have discovered, I think it's 62 million year cycles of evolution, spontaneous evolution, and devolution, disappearance, emergence of new life and disappearance of life through the development and the developmental stages of the early life forms on the planet. So there's a beautiful correlation here with this particular wave. So the second wave brought with it the information and the instructions for the generation of plants and animals. So it would have started off in the earlier stages. This is also a long evolutionary process with the first plant life, algae, unicellular organisms, bacteria, viruses, DNA, all of that that supports the creation of life. So that's all in the second wave. And that I will go into in the next session when we actually have a look at this whole concept of viruses. And how they support evolution, which is a completely different perspective that we're not given in the mainstream. So the third wave was initiated 41 million years ago and has a cycle of 3 million years. And this gave birth to the form of advanced, I say advanced life, and I use that term very, very loosely, believe me. But the primates, because the primates were the seed form in terms of the structure, they were the seed form for human beings. So it was the life form that actually preceded the emergence of human beings. Bipedal primates. So there we actually see that. And then the fourth wave was 2 million years ago, was activated. That has a life cycle of 158,000 years duration. So again, it's very slow. This saw within this time frame and time period the evolution from primates to the modern form of human beings, and the various forms that they've actually pulled out in the archaeological records. So we saw a couple of experimental forms, I think, but that saw the emergence of what we might term the prototype human beings. That then developed with the fifth wave, things changed again. 103,000 years ago was the activation of that wave. It has a wavelength of 8,000 years. So it means that change happens every 8,000 years. And fascinatingly, that saw the birthing of culture in respect of human beings. Up until that point, human beings existed either as nomadic, very, very small units or singular individuals. And this development of culture actually saw pretty significant changes in humanity. That is also marked with the appearance of cave paintings, concepts of being connected with the whole, of spirituality, that there was something beyond the human being, something bigger. Lots of indications there. And as I've said before, within this, the fifth wave, that's where all of our indigenous peoples in the world emerged. They all date back to around this time. The oldest living DNA in living human beings on the planet at the moment is in the Khoisan people in Africa, and their DNA, and they refer to themselves as the oldest people, which is really quite fascinating that they've held the cultural wisdom and understanding alive within their beings, is 80,000 years old. The DNA that the modern Khoisan people in the deserts in South Africa, their DNA is 80,000 years old. So they are squarely fifth wave individuals representing the initial transition into the embodiment of spirit, if you like, into life forms and the cognizance of that on the planet. And then 3000 BCE saw the emergence or the trigger of the sixth wave, which brought with it the holographic constructs and information for higher civilizations. That has a cycle of 394 years. So you can actually see that the cycles are getting quicker and quicker. This is where we started seeing the rise and fall of civilizations along with the sixth wave. The fifth wave was very consistent for a long, long period of time with all of the indigenous peoples. So the highest civilizations, we can also trace that back to many of the Egyptian and the more modern civilizations that we're utilizing and we're exposed to technology to create these incredible monuments and buildings that even now we kind of wonder exactly how they did that. But there are other aspects that we can look at as we go through the understanding of this. But that's what that wave brought with it, was the understanding of how to structure communities of people within civilizations, and it also saw the birth of rulership. So it's empires, the birth of empires, if you want. 1755 saw the initiation or the activation of the seventh wave, which brought with it the information for technological advancement. So that is the key to the seventh wave. And if you think here, this is where we really see the technological, the industrial revolution, you know, and how that actually started speeding up and really accelerating in terms of key inventions from that period of time. And you can see, if you think about the number of inventions since then, you know, we've got methods of building, we've got motor cars, bridges, steam trains, the phone, the television, you know, some really incredible inventions that actually took place as a consequence of the activation of the seventh wave. And that also has a much faster frequency in respect of it turning around every 19.7 years. So very fast. And then in 99, as you may have heard me mention, January 5th, 1999 was the digital revolution. This saw the initiation of the eighth wave. This was a massive time of awakening. Some of you may be able to relate back, I mentioned it on Loren's show just the other day, to the periods of sort of 1997, 98. Where there was this massive wave, this massive tranche of people that were actually waking up. And that I know I can relate to, because that was also my time, my trigger at that particular moment in time. And a lot of people that I've spoken to, it was when things became, the new agey concepts became more publicly available. And in fact, that particular awakening and the digital revolution that it spawned also awoke within people the right brain. It actually triggered a whole change in perspective to open up to feminine aspects, feminine issues in the right brain. And then the ninth wave, which is currently active, was initiated, fully activated March the 9th, 2011. It has a very short duration and cycle of 18 days, and it represents the unification, the completion of the cycle. It also represents then the capacity and ability to take the insights of the ninth wave to be able to feed into and influence and bridge all the way down the other waves to transmute and transform some of the more negative manifestations that have actually arisen as a consequence of the earlier waves. Does that make sense? Yeah. This short duration as well means that we're being subjected to something that actually has pretty high frequency. So it means that we're rapidly cycling through this time. So our perception of time increasing, it's passing ever more quickly, things increasing in frequency is absolutely right, because we are experiencing, because of the frequency of this wave, time passing more quickly, and a rapid turnaround in respect of almost a logarithmic development of new ideas and concepts and creative capacity and ability. So that just gives you the framework, and we're going to go more deeply into the understanding of these waves through subsequent sessions, but that gives you the understanding. And to me, looking at this, I kind of go, yeah, this makes absolutely perfect sense for me. Let me just see if I can get this open again. Nope. Okay, so just a pictorial representation, just to give you an idea of the differences. Two-dimensional depiction of the waves. In reality, they are spirals. So we're talking about spirals of time. This is the fifth wave. And the fifth wave, there's its wavelength, which is a couple of thousand years. And here's the sixth wave. So for every curve that you get here, you're getting 20 cycles of the sixth wave. And that's just an indication of the time overlap. So you can see here that you get an overlap in respect of the activation of one wave as it's being carried forward, and the preceding wave, which is actually still active in some particular way. So every time there's an initiation of a new wave, we've got chaotic nodes where we get the overlap of frequencies. Yep. This, just very, very briefly, it is just a pictorial representation of actual scientific work that has been done by anthropologists and archaeologists in respect of determining cycles of extinction and biodiversity. So it speaks into the cycles associated with the waves that I was talking about earlier. And this first one is the 62 million year evolutionary or extinction cycle. So every new wave that comes in brings with it an evolutionary imperative, and every upcycle of that wave also initiates new growth and evolution. So it's really quite interesting to be able to look at this. So these are some of your primary life forms, because it goes back millions and millions of years. But they observed this distinct cycle of the rise in numbers of species and types of life forms, and then a drop off or a fall away, and then sudden rise. I mean, here in geologic terms, this is nothing. It's like a step change. So they actually call it punctuated equilibrium. So they can't always explain the rapid rise and the rapid fall in appearance and disappearance of species in terms of natural disasters. In some of them they can. They find evidence of meteors and craters and heaven knows what. But it's not always associated with a physical or natural impact as far as the planet's concerned. So, but very distinct cycles. So here we got the arthropods, a whole lot of them disappearing, and then suddenly new ones emerging, fall off, step change, new ones appearing. So this cycle is every 62 million years. So this goes along beautifully with the second wave, plants and animals second wave. And then within that cycle, they found other cycles of evolution, which are equally as important. And that within that, there is a 26 million year cycle, which also shows you, things go along quite happily for a period of time, and then boom, new stuff emerges and lots of stuff disappears. Oh, new life forms, disappearance, new life forms, disappearance. So you can see these peaks, it's most unusual. So hence the Darwinian theory of evolution that we've actually been taught through the traditional schools of thought does not and cannot apply, given the evidence that these graphs actually show, these distinct and rapid changes in evolution. Very, very significant and relevant. So within that, we also have 10,000 year cycles and 5,000 year cycles where we see rapid change taking place. What is really significant at the moment is that even in terms of these cycles, they are at this moment in time overdue for a sharp change in their cycle. So we have cycles upon cycles coalescing, all telling us that it's time for a major step change. So when you overlay that with the understanding of the 9 waves, it becomes really significant that we are in a time of massive biological change. and of course other change. So that's really just going into some of the observations that have actually been made. One of the things that is significant in respect of the waves is the relationships that the waves have to the expression of life through the human form and the polarities of the human mind. Now, the human being in respect of culture and the advancement only really begins with the fifth wave, with the indigenous peoples. So this just gives you a very brief overview. We're going to go into more detail with this. But the fifth wave, this indicates that the qualities of the wave are absolutely transparent. So the fifth wave represented a primal understanding and connection with a unity consciousness. So they did have an understanding of the thread that runs through all of life. They could see through, they worked with spirit beings, and all of the rest of it. So primal unity consciousness with the fifth wave, total transparency. The subsequent waves that came then actually progressed humanity through a series of shifts and changes relating to the way that the mind was working in our levels of connection with universal source, or with the creative source, so that we could experience life in all of its forms and expressions of the human being in order to complete the journey back to unity consciousness with advanced wisdom, and developmental capacity. So the sixth wave brought with the sixth wave actually shut off the right brain. So you can see it's in darkness. So part of the holographic information within the sixth wave was to feed the left-brained approach to life, which led to, which is one of the reasons why we see the imperial relationships developing and the rulerships, etc., from and during the sixth wave periods. The seventh wave brought with it a hologram, which actually closed off both sides of the brain in respect of putting them in darkness and actually serving to disconnect the individual's own capacity to connect to source directly. So what happened also during this particular period is that scientism, and science took over as the god. That mediators and the imposition of the church, anything that didn't agree with the church as the mediators to God, they were the ones who actually had the direct line, not the average human being. So that was all patterned into the hologram of that particular wave. So we see that moving through time. The eighth wave, which is initiated in 1999, gave us what we might term a self-authored approach to life. It reopened the right brain, but it actually put the left brain into darkness. So it gave us the capacity to reopen our connection, our direct connection to source. And it's in this time, so you actually see it happening. It's in this time that we find so much of the channeling and the new age concepts, etc., this limitless understanding coming into fruition through this wave. And then from 2011, we see the ninth wave. And the ninth wave again brings us the transparency. It brings us the capacity to restore balance and harmony through the correct and proper balanced utilization of both aspects of our mind and beingness, which gives us the capacity to actually become self-transforming in our own alchemical way in respect of how we approach life. So I've always said as well that what this is, what the ninth wave is doing and what we are doing is we are building the bridge between the ninth wave and the fifth wave. So it's the primal unity consciousness, and that's why the indigenous peoples have been so important and why they've been decimated. They have held the knowledge of primal unity consciousness. What we are doing is we're actually helping to elevate that into a new way of being. So we're providing a continuity through the various expressions of the waves that came before. Make sense? Okay. Ninth wave calculator. Oh, ignore this. This was actually from last year. It was really just to demonstrate the actions of the waves, that the wave actually gives us a period of initiation and action, plus it gives us a period of reflection and healing. When it's in the downward part of the cycle, it's the breakdown, the healing part of the cycle. And when it's in the upward movement, it's actually in the active part of the cycle. So where we're at now, as Rachel indicated, we're moving into a healing part of the ninth wave cycle. So certainly for the next session, we will be engaging in some of the internal healing processes in order to help to balance the impacts of the waves. Now, the spirals of time. Do you guys need just a 2-minute? I'm just really frustrated that I can't bring the chat room up again, because that was just so useful. And I find it quite strange. There it is. There it is. Okay. So thank you. I just want to go through the comments just to give you a little bit of insight. So thank you. Some beautiful, beautiful information here. So Bonnie says, this really makes even more sense than the first time with all that's going on now. Absolutely. And that is what I was seeing as I was going through, and it really felt important for me to rerun it with a different slant and with a new understanding. So Rachel says, we are all connected with one another through resonance with the frequencies of the diamond light grid. Yes, so it brings that into another way of understanding too. Ika says, love Rupert. Yes, I heard the story from my dad, who worked in the Institute of Evolutionary Physiology as a communication scientist. The speed of it all is very encouraging. Love that, Ika. Thank you. It's just beautiful to have those validations as well through this story. Rachel says, we are writing the books, so to speak, and putting them in the library for others to read when they are ready. Beautiful analogy. Absolutely, we are. And that's part of the embedding. Indeed, it's so, yes. So I know Manon had to leave. Unfortunately, I didn't see it. Super interesting. Looking forward to the rest of the replay. Yep, we'll see you next week. Ika says Chinese history aligns very well with the sixth wave. That's fascinating, because I haven't gone into cultural history with each of the cultures into that much detail. So that's really beautiful that you actually have that information and insight to share with us. Thank you. Trisha also says, yes, she's observed 97, 98, 99 was a real trigger time for her. We had our first computers in 99. I think I had one a bit earlier than that, but yeah, home computers. Ika started reading about the Maya and their calendar in 98, but it's 2011 when things started going beyond crazy for me. This is beautiful, because you guys are just also validating for yourselves the significance of the impact and the reality of these waves in respect to the evidence of them in your lives. And this is, it's really beautiful. Thank you. Trisha says March 2011, was that not when there was a big earthquake in New Zealand? In Australia, and the energy buildup at that time was off the chart. Very interesting, Trisha. Yes, I think there was a big earthquake. And once we know how the waves roll and the frequency with them, we become a lot more attuned to the movement, and it begins to make a lot more sense. Feels as though there is some energy releases around the plates at the moment, something happening in New Zealand. Yeah. Marjorie, I've been following earthquakes, volcanoes, and hotspots around the world. And yes, there is a release going on all over the planet. And if we think about it from a patterning perspective, thank you for all of those comments, everyone. I'm going to really try and not close the chat box. Now I'm going to hold it open so I can see you guys. That we can see the way that the planet is actually responding, because it's not just that the planet's raising her frequency, so we are. It's that all of life is actually being impacted. The planet is impacting us as the cosmic waves actually run through her. And as we do our clearing out and do our work, the earth is clearing out as well, because it's part and parcel of all that is embedded within the universal field. So yes, the purging that has happened this year through the events that have taken place is tremendous. So it's no surprise, in a sense, that the Earth is also experiencing these incredible eruptions and shifts and changes in the plates at the same time. So there's a reciprocal relationship between ourselves as human beings and the earth. We are not the scourge of the earth. We are not parasites on the earth. We exist in interrelationship with the earth. Ika's saying it became clear that it comes down to changes in quality of light, and that is controlled by vibrations. Yep, by resonance. Thank you, everyone. Just a little bit of a break from the information to actually share those comments. That's really lovely. Thank you. Okay, just love these images, and this really just takes us into the spirals of time. I'm very conscious of the time. I said these are 2-hour sessions, so I'm really just going to speed up through the last few slides here, and hopefully we can keep it to 2 hours. So the first image gives you an actual depiction of what's called a spiral, one of the spiral galaxies, which looks like a rose. It looks like a flower unfolding, which is just really beautiful. That the spirals of time, if we really think about the movement of our planet through space, and that movement relative to the sun, and that movement of our solar system and the movement of our galaxy, what we have is we have a confluence of spiraling movements of every living body in conjunction with the spiraling movements of the incoming fields that are influencing the changes. So the sun actually moves through space. You can see it on this depiction, and this comes from some of Nassim Haramein's work. This particular image, the sun moves through space, actually dragging the planets behind it, and each of those planets creates a vortex based on its spiral frequency and the diameter and patterning of that particular spiral. So that's why you get what looks like a whole mass of spirals intertwining. But essentially, we are being dragged along behind the sun as it's moving through the arm of our Milky Way galaxy, headed towards, I understand, something that is known as the Great Attractor, which is pulling things into its localized area of space. What was I going to say? So we're getting dragged along, if you like, behind the sun. So we're never in the same place twice. Okay. So Earth is moving. We're being moved. We're not in the same area of space that we were like 10 minutes ago or 2 years ago or 50 years ago. So all of this is constantly changing. The significance of that is that as we travel on Earth, so here's one thing. Our DNA, we know that our DNA in our bodies, all life, all animals' DNA, is constantly transmitting and receiving and embedding information into the field, which we've spoken about. So we're constantly receiving and we're constantly transmitting. So as we're moving through space, all of the information that is transmitted into the field is actually imprinted into the spiral that we are actually traveling, because that's part of the field. We're also embedded within a universal field. It's not just the human field, it's the field of Earth that is actually creating and is part and parcel of this moving spiral. So the field itself is a spiral. So everything that we experience as individuals and everything that our ancestors have experienced as individuals exists on this spiral that has been created as our planet and our sun and our solar system has actually moved through the galactic environment. So everyone who has ever lived, their information is embedded in that field. DNA leaves an imprint on the structure of space-time itself, and this has been observed by experiments. And if you want to Google this guy's name, Peter Garriev, David Wilcock speaks about him. They've actually done experiments with DNA in a vacuum, which show that you take the physical DNA out and you're still left with an imprint of light within that vacuum where the DNA was. So it shows that DNA itself leaves an imprint or a pattern within the field, even once the physical DNA has moved on. Okay, so that's just to put it into perspective. One of the important aspects of that, and this speaks into how we might have been experiencing things just recently as well, is that all of our memories, because our memories are created as a consequence of our emotional responses and reactions to events that actually take place, whether it's happy or whether it's sad and challenging, our memories are stored in the field. Okay, so we leave behind this spiral of memories, but also the field is being influenced by the chaos of the incoming waves and how they are being played out. So that, in one sense, is actually scrambling because we're adjusting and continually recalibrating. It is scrambling our memories. So many of you may have discovered that you've been experiencing brain fog, the inability to remember things. Now, I mean, we could laugh it away and go, it's because I'm getting old. But there are many people who are not that old who are experiencing a similar thing in respect of their capacity to access even the memories from even recent times. And that's because of the chaotic nodes and the scrambling actually within the field, and the chaos that's actually there. But it also sort of gets us to a point where we live more fully in the moment. Does that make sense? Even mid-sentence. Yeah, Rachel, I just did that, didn't I? Yeah, even mid-sentence, I kind of forgot what I was going to say. But that's exactly what's happening. Yeah, same. Trisha says, yeah, same. So if you actually have a look and understand that, you can you begin to see how even people around it's also a really good thing, because it means that even those people who are entrenched and bought into the narrative, the very fact that the fields are being scrambled, um, would mean that they would have difficulty accessing the memories of things that they have learned or been told from the external media. So it perhaps leaves them a little bit more open to accessing what we are recalibrating within the field in the moment. Does that make sense? So it's like not giving up hope, even when we see people that actually seem to be like so caught up with the external narrative and fully entrenched in it. There is the capacity to move beyond that. It's also difficult to know what's real anymore. Yes. That's interesting. Yeah, Ike says I've experienced those memory fluctuations. Yeah, but now we can remember all that Earth remembers. Yes, all that Earth remembers, and all through right through the spirals of time back to the very beginning, isn't it? It is quite trippy if you think about it, because it means we can journey through the field of that consciousness through those spirals back in time, that we can access information that belongs with those earlier waves that we can alchemize in this moment. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. Okay, we are running close to, you guys you've been so fantastic. I absolutely love it, with your capacity to stay the course here. Let's just put this up. Cosmic Blueprints. This is just another sharing of the spirals. Time. We know that DNA, the typical representation of the double-stranded DNA. This is just a visionary artist depiction, but here you have a beautiful the DNA galaxy. So you find the same blueprints evident throughout all of life, right throughout the cosmos. So it's just beautiful to understand that. Coming here to this one. Literal definition, I said I was going to have a look at redefining the term ascension. Literal definition of the word means the act of ascending or ascent, to be risen up or to climb. Ascension is a conscious choice to engage in evolution, and that is one of my favorite expressions. It is a conscious choice to engage with this evolutionary journey, and that's what we are doing. You know, in some ways, the New Age did something of a disservice to the understanding of this. because many begun to understand their ascension journey as being taken out of the human form, ascending into 5D. We're not, it's like the energy that we're expanding into as we choose to step forward on a moment by moment basis with this new evolutionary process. It is the path of those who are consciously choosing to step onto a higher level of light. Personal choice to boldly step into the unknown. So it's fearless, it's courageous. It doesn't just happen, we choose. In order to expand into an experience that is entirely new. Ascension is in its basic spiritual or mystical sense, can be thought of as the highest state of man. It is the expansion of awareness. An individual is ascending in the sense that something of a lower vibration being raised up or becoming higher in vibration. So yes, we can actually understand that it does require our dedication and participation. And I think that is what is also sort of critical to understand. Ascension is the alignment and integration of all levels of our being into a unified whole, our true essence, which is the purest reflection of the source of all creation. Ninth wave. It is an expanded awareness. It is an inner alchemical process of transmutation. It's an ongoing alchemy that we're going through at the moment. It is acceptance. It is an embracing of duality and an ability to attune to higher frequency information. And we're talking about, again, ninth wave, higher frequency. It is a journey, not a destination. The initiation of each of the 9 waves represents a step change on the ascension journey. So if you really go back to that image, we ascended from the 5th wave to the 6th wave in respect of our way of being, because we expanded our concept of what life was and how we were manifesting that through communities and societies. We ascended from the 6th to the 7th wave again and again. So we're at the moment sort of ascending into the capacity to be able to embody and work with the frequencies of the 9th wave. To bring it into being and to live this. It is the return to pristine diamond consciousness, and it is love. So ultimately, that's what ascension is. It's used as a fancy term and a marketing tool in many ways. And it is so simple when it comes down to it. It's simple, but it's complex. It's complex in its simplicity is another expression. It's one of the spiritual paradoxes. We understand the simplicity of the spiritual journey, but ultimately, it is not the easiest thing to do. Simple, but not easy. So that just puts a perspective on it. So I think, there we go. I've finished with all of the head stuff for this week. And I thank you, all of you, for staying the course. It's been a lot of head stuff, I know. So thank you again. Let's see what other comments we've got here in the chat room. Beautiful definition of ascension, echoes Alice Bailey. The initiation is always self-initiated. Yes, I love it. Nobody can give that to us. It is self-initiated from within. And Rachel says, I think sometimes words cannot explain what we feel, as we often say, returning to wholeness and becoming our true self, diamond light self. Absolutely. I hope you've enjoyed that. You will have the recording and the slides so that you can go through again and you can make some notes, because I know that there's so much stuff in this that yes, and I know it's delivered in a different way that I delivered it last time, the first time that we actually did it. Bonnie, thank you. This is so beautiful, and again ties everything for me together. This is the best way to express what is difficult to express. This is nourishing. Oh, beautiful. Thank you for those comments. That's just delightful. So what I'm actually going to suggest you do is, bearing in mind that the physical trees on the planet are manifestations of a central cosmic principle, I'd like you to spend some time this week. You don't have to, it's like do what feels right for you, but it's a recommendation is to connect with the tree in whichever way you can acknowledge it as a blueprint of the universal construct of these waves emanating. Be aware of the energy of any information, of signals, feelings, and emotions, and just try and connect with the 9 waves in respect of the emanation. And then spend some time in emanation, picturing these spirals, connecting with these spirals, with the earth, with the cosmos as it's actually moving forward. Let your consciousness travel through your DNA back to, and with your mother's and father's DNA spiral, back into the collective spiral as far as you can go. Let your consciousness just travel. And set the intention to purify the spirals with your true essence self, which is love. Now, I do not have a recording here to guide you. I was hoping to get through the slides with a little bit more time to spare so that I could take you through a live process. I think I do have a recording on the spirals of time somewhere in one of the original Golden Diamonds webinars. So if I can find it, I will send it to you. Otherwise, what I would suggest you do is just sit in meditation on your own and actually connect with these spirals so that you get a sense of. We will do some more energy processing beginning with session 2. Just get a sense of the extent and the spirals of time and everything that you can access through your being as it flows through you, because all 9 waves are actually flowing through you, right from the information that forms the very matter that creates your physical form. And just connect with them and purify. And thank you so much for the comments, for the feedback. Does anybody have any questions? There's some thank yous. I'll send you a copy of the chat room, which is just fantastic. And I thank you for the separate comments. Thank you, Ika. I will certainly do that. Any questions at all before we finish up for today? I can't believe it's been 2 hours. It's just been non-stop. So like I say, I know there's a lot of head stuff with this, and I want to thank you for staying the course. No, you guys all fine? You happy with this? You happy with the recommendations for this week? Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you for being here to share again. It's been great. I've loved it. And thank you to those of you for all of your wonderful comments in the chat room. I hope this is also providing, it is my intention that this provides a little bit of confidence for navigating some of the external arena and some of the events that we're being faced with at the moment. So I just want to wish you all God bless for this week, and I really look forward to connecting with you again next week with some exciting development forward. So happy that you're here. Thank you all for the comments. That's just really beautiful. Looking forward to next week. Yes, it does bring confidence. Love you. Thank you.